Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mayor Cyril Jefferson convening the special meeting of the High Point City Council. Here with me in the room, I have every council member present, save Councilmember Johnson, who we believe will be joining us at some point in the near future. We have a few items on our agenda. Before we can get to that, we'll actually need to adopt our agenda. And so for that reason, I ask if there's a motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt.
Second. Motion's been made by Councilmember Holmes, seconded by Councilmember Peters. Any discussion on the motion to adopt our agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it, and we have our agenda. The only item for discussion is item 2025-062, consideration of the City of High Point's 2025-2026 legislative session priorities. For that, our Managing Director, Mr. Hollis, will present to us, and I imagine we'll have some other guests that we'll hear from here shortly. Mr. Hollis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Madam Manager. Jerron Hollis here, and for this item, won't be up here too long, but every year we meet with our state elected officials and communicate our legislative priorities and financial priorities for our community and align those with the priorities and the momentum for our state legislature. In fact, on the 24th of February, we'll have the Guilford County delegation that we're meeting, and we'll get a chance to talk about much of what we're going to be discussing briefly today. So for this in a nutshell, we'll just be talking about some of the things that we will, as the City of High Point, have as priorities, but also the collaborative efforts that Business High Point has that are in alignment with what we're doing here as a city. So without any further ado, I do see our state lobbyist, Mr. Fred Baggett. He's here with us, and this won't take long. I imagine if there's some questions that I can answer, and we've got some other folks in that might be able to help with those. So what we're looking at from the city standpoint is some key initiatives, many of which we've talked about, and generally what we try to do is we look at those areas where there is a need, but also areas that are underway or that there is some collaborative function as what the legislature is already planning to do. So the water, sewer main, utility infrastructure, the plan there is to have a $2 million ask that will continue to support. Primarily, this helps put us in a better position to continue developing in high growth areas. We have our year-to-year maintenance that we do, that we'll be doing anyway, but as we expand, as we grow, as people continue to come to the community, those infrastructure investments continue to be important. The shared use kitchen, as all of you are aware, is an initiative that we've had going on for a few years. This is a great opportunity, again, a $2 million ask there, and this lines up with us promoting food security and also revitalizing some of the underutilized spaces and providing opportunities for our food entrepreneurs. The Center for Active Adults is a $750,000 ask, and here you've got specific amenities, pickleball courts, paved trail, fitness equipment, and these amenities will help with a part of the idea that we have in place for making this a location for our adults in the community that have this as a recreational alternative. With these, we try to find things that the ask is a part of a project, as we said, that's ongoing, and so our ask would help to finish out portions of that particular initiative with that Center for Active Adults. I talked about the collaborative projects that we have with Business High Point. Some of those have been identified. I'll talk about those briefly. The High Point Housing Fund, which gives us the opportunity to leverage a great need for the community for housing with the opportunity to continue to have development that can bring much needed housing to our area. So the Business High Point has that on their agenda to ask for support, and that's something that we definitely support. If we go to small scale manufacturing, that is a great opportunity for us, specifically facility upfits, roof repair, elevator installation, plumbing, electrical improvements. those things in the, for small scale will help us, it's not my phone. Those improvements will help us move the project down the line, and it incorporates some of our work that we're doing with GTCC, economic development, and again, revitalization in a key target area and opportunity zone. Thrive, Shops on Washington, that's another economic small business initiative. Many of you are aware of some of the work that Thrive has been doing that moves that into that corridor on Washington, and there'll be a collaborative effort there with Business High Point to ask for support in that area. And then our athletic fields. So a part of the athletic complex, one of the things that we want to be mindful of is our ability to compete for tournaments, to increase our demand here in the community for hotel lodging and support our active local sports club, including Carolina Core FC Youth. So the ask for the athletic fields as part of the athletic complex is a key initiative that we'll be bringing to our state delegation. Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, members of council, one thing that I do want to point out, this is Tasha Loganford, city manager speaking for those that may be listening online, is that the numbers that you see attached to these projects, most of them are around that $2 million number or less. From some of the conversations that we've been having, both from the Business High Point side, but then also with some of our legislators, is we're looking for projects that, one, we've already had some level of community input or community engagement associated with them. So most of the projects that you saw that were on the City of High Point side are ones that we can point to where citizens have provided some kind of input, or they have been participated with us in some way representing those projects. For the ones that are collaborative, those are also projects that will probably be somewhere that ask around that $2 million or less, but we feel like with that level of investment, it would be able to show significant movement for those projects, or either take those projects over the finish line. For the small scale manufacturing piece, we've talked a lot about having Business High Point move the generator expansion project into the building. We have some federal funds that are associated with that. But if we're able to get some additional funding from the state, that would allow us to completely build out that section that would support the expansion of the business incubator in that space. So what we're really trying to do is show that that portion of the project would be complete once we actually get the additional funding into the projects. Same thing with Thrive, with the Shops on Washington. The city's made an investment in the infrastructure that'll need to happen for that project to continue. You have Business High Point that has some funding going into the buildings. You have community support from other nonprofits that are participating in that project. So some additional money will help get that project complete and open. And the same thing with the athletic field. So although we don't have the specific numbers there, I think that we'll refine those collaborative asks over the next 2 weeks. We actually have some meetings tomorrow and one more next week with our collaborative partners to finalize what those numbers will look like. So that's why you're not seeing the numbers here, but I wanted you all to know what the discussions were, as we'll be finalizing that probably before we have another council meeting.
And
Thank you.
And I think also in terms of timeline, we've got our session next Monday.
We do.
Chat with our delegation there.
And we may get some feedback from our delegation members. Last year when we had our joint meeting with the delegation, we went in and we talked about some of our priorities, but we also took that as a time for us to listen and hear some of the feedback that our delegation had for us. So there may be some projects that we add to this based on that discussion that we have next week, or some where we get a little bit more direction and it might not be a good fit, and we can adjust and make those changes after we have that meeting on the 24th, that's Monday. So that's how we did it last year. We kind of went in with our list, we had some discussions, and the list did not change much after we had that meeting, but it was a good opportunity for us to have some dialogue and some feedback with those that were represented during that meeting.
Thank you, Madam Manager. The last thing that I have is just from a legislation and policy standpoint, downzoning. The idea there is to continue to have discussion with the delegation on the downzoning changes, on our future planning and development strategies. There is significant talk around the state about how this is being approached. Different communities have voiced their observations about this legislation. So we continue to stay in contact with our delegation and try to encourage outcomes that are most beneficial for our community. So that's something that's still ongoing. It'll be a part of those discussions that we continue to have, like we're having next week.
And we do have an option where we have kind of kept the option open for us to have special legislation that's just specific to High Point. I will tell you that's not necessarily our preferred method. I think that our strategy is very much we want to support whatever statewide fixes come to mind, and that's the strategy that we're pursuing. We've had some discussions about whether or not as a council resolution should be passed, and really I think the best position for us to be in is make sure that we can speak to our delegation about what the impact has been on High Point. Still keep as many doors open as possible, but the best option for this is for us to continue to be able to work with our league and other partners for that statewide fix. But if for some reason we start to feel like High Point needs to have something there, then we do have kind of a member of our delegation that would be willing to sponsor some local legislation for us, so that door is open. But again, clearly the best outcome is for us to be consistent with the statewide fix on that.
Is there anything currently on the table since this passed? Is there anything working through the process at this point?
There are, and the city attorney shared an email that had some legislation in it that the league is working on. That is something that we can continue to share with you all. That, of course, is the best strategy. There's still conversations with leadership about how to, best handle that. Fred could probably speak to that as well. So those conversations are going and they're progressing. There is also one other real policy issue that we talked about around transportation, because we realize kind of our Main Street corridor is important to council. But we also realize that a lot of our transportation projects will have to focus on what's happening in the western part of our state as well. So right now, we have not listed kind of transportation as one of our policy issues, but in our conversations that we're having, we are still talking about the Lexington corridor and what that means for High Point. And we're also talking about the Main Street corridor and what that means for economic development for High Point. But we didn't list those specifically as policy considerations because I think the transportation discussion is going to be a little bit more robust when you're considering the needs that are in other parts of our state. So we wanted to be sensitive to that as well.
Well, at this point, we just want to thank the council for continuing to be supportive every year as we go out and do some of the work of having the dialogue and the discussion. And we've seen some successes. Most recently, look at what we're able to do with Salmon Drive extension. So if there aren't any other questions, or if there are questions at this time, I'd be glad to entertain those.
Council, any questions for staff? I've got a couple questions. We mentioned this sort of as our priorities for upcoming legislative sessions. Are we seeing these as priorities that align both at the state and federal level?
We are. Typically, conversations around infrastructure, especially around water and sewer, have been very positive, have been received fairly positive with our legislators. Projects that are focused on economic development or supporting small businesses also seem to be projects that are well received. The county itself has embarked on an initiative to be an age-friendly Guilford. They talk about the impact of individuals looking at the state of North Carolina as being the place for individuals to retire. So that is why we wanted to go ahead and try to build out as much as possible when we're thinking about our Center for Active Adults, because we want to make sure that High Point is positioned both with amenities and also housing to be able to support that. In our Center for Active Adults, we have our bond that was passed that was supported by our citizens. That project is already under construction, and it was easy for us to quantify some things that we had to value engineer out of that project that we really feel like should be part of it to really make it successful. So I think all three of those we can point back to: infrastructure, growing small businesses, or supporting economic development in our area, and then how do we support the retiree community. So I think all three of those align with some of the positive comments that we've heard from our delegation. On the ones that are collaborative as well, we've been at the table for the last month or so, working with our partners at Business High Point, the Market Authority, and also the Condon Family Foundation and the Visit High Point. And all three of these projects are ones that we put forward to some degree last year and still seem to have a level of support. Are there others that council, and we also took a look at these projects based on some of the strategic priorities that came out of our session in November, to figure out if there are projects that align there. So we did go through that list, but if there are others that, you know, you all may be thinking about that you feel like we missed, you know, we're also happy to entertain those and, you know, see if there's a place where those might fit, especially leading into the conversations that we're gonna have on Monday.
Do we have any updates on the timeline for 300 Oak?
For the actual, so that one, with the grant that we got, we have a little bit of a window of time. I think the bigger concern is, I don't know what the dates are of where Business High Point has to expend the funds that they received from the state for that move.
Okay.
But I feel fairly confident that we have enough flexibility. I think it's maybe 2028 or so that we have.
2031.
2031,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
man, no, that's
Sorry.
wonderful.
I was thinking 28, but 2031 for those
Okay.
funds. So we have a little bit of a runway with those.
Okay.
For the 3
Yeah. But I don't know what the timeline is for Business High Point to start spending down some of the dollars that they received. So I want to make sure that we're positioned so that they don't lose those.
Has the design phase portion of the urban greenway behind 300 Oak been determined?
Look, it's under design. It's like 90%. So
Okay.
we're working with the feds now to get permission to start doing property acquisition.
Okay.
So yes, that's
Okay.
all that's
So
moving right now.
Not along Green, but behind the 300
The
Oak.
whole thing.
Okay,
All
all
of it,
right,
the whole
good,
project,
okay,
yeah.
super, all right. Because that will be important to have some activity happening there at the same
It
time.
will be.
Yeah, okay.
If we can time those things to happen together,
Okay,
that would be great.
I'll pray for it.
I know in the Metro Mayor's calls that we've been having every week, and they talk about legislative priorities. In addition to what's happening in Western North Carolina, housing gets talked about quite a bit, because all throughout the state, everyone's feeling those pressures. And so hopefully, the housing fund is something that we'll be able to get some support with. And then we'll continue to see, as the federal government continues to align on what its priorities are. I imagine housing will be a big part of that too. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not.
Okay.
We've got Mr. Baggett here with us, who's a former High Point City attorney. And would love, if you don't mind, Fred, just to have a few remarks so our team can hear from you and for the public to be able to hear what you're hearing down in Raleigh.
Sure. First of all, it's great to be here. I've talked to Tasha and Jerron about all these issues. The appropriation process will be tight this year. That's a cliche, but it happens to be true. The revenue projections for the state, especially in the second year of the biennium, 26-27, are frighteningly low. The governor calls it, we're facing a fiscal cliff, and that's not exaggeration. There's some concerns about the long-term revenue projection for the new budget. However, your appropriation requests are, as the manager said, small. In the context of the state budget, $2 million is a rounding error. It means nothing. It's a matter of getting the priorities before the right people. There are two main ways something gets in the budget, the state budget. One is through the traditional budget appropriation committees. There are different areas like transportation and so forth. And the other is individual request of legislators. Often, not always, but often, individual legislators are encouraged or invited to present individual requests for their area. So that's another source of getting something in the state budget. As far as downzoning is concerned, I was on the phone with Erin Winnie just an hour ago, Megan, about the downzoning issue. She's cautiously hopeful that a statewide solution will be addressed. It may not be complete repeal of what was done in the last session on downzoning, but something that the cities could live with, and the people who are proposing this ban on downzoning could live with also. She's cautiously optimistic. She does say that local bills probably are not detrimental with that effort. They show interest by legislators in the issue and could help with the statewide bill. She doesn't encourage it, but doesn't discourage it. As the manager said, to beat a deadline, we asked Representative Quick to request that a local bill on down zoning be prepared, and it has, or is in the process of being prepared, just so that we can introduce that bill if you decide that it should be filed. It would apply only to High Point. It would join 5 or 6 other local jurisdictions that already have local bills filed. I don't think it would make the difference in passing a statewide bill, but it may be some slight insurance that something would be done for High Point in case a statewide solution is not achieved. But that'll be a call for y'all to make. That deadline is March 3rd for actually filing a local bill, so you can decide that. I really look forward to the meeting Monday with your local delegation. You have great relationships there, so I think that'll, as has been said, it'll be an opportunity not only to say what's on our mind, but to hear from them, get reactions to what we've suggested, and maybe new things that they're interested in. So, we had a good session last time. We got a couple of local bills passed that were important to High Point. A legislative annexation that was needed, and some flexibility in disposition of real property that High Point owns. So hopefully we can be successful this time. So thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you so much. Any questions for Mr. Baggett?
One, Fred, you
Yes, sir.
talked about the fiscal cliff and revenues being low. Drivers, what do they see at the state as the driver of
I don't know.
the drop in revenue?
I don't know. I mean, these figures are derived from a think tank, you know, in the legislature and in the governor's office.
Yeah.
They look at receipts and trends. I don't know what's driving the.
Yeah, you would think about the level of investment that we've had over the last few years. It seems counterintuitive that we would be facing that.
Perhaps so. I really don't know the reasons. It's a technical thing, but I don't know why revenues are projected to be big. Of course, the budget itself has grown. Last year's budget was bigger than the year before, and has to be absorbed.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions for staff at all remaining on this item?
Well, our next council meeting is March the 3rd, so if we're going to decide to do the local bill.
We would let you know. It would typically be kind of an email of kind of how things are, and if it may be something that comes that day, well, we may need to get some direction. In preparation for Monday, we always have a handout that we provide our delegation, so staff will go ahead and we'll make sure that information is prepared on each project. And we hope to have a little bit more direction too by Monday from our partners, our collaborative partners, on what the ask is. So make sure that our asks are consistent with what our partners will have for those collaborative projects. And we'll make sure that all those documents are prepared for those members that are able to make the meeting on Monday afternoon. Yeah.
And just so I know, who here is attending next Monday?
What time on Monday?
I think
Our
it's at
time
12 o'clock.
is 12 to 1 is a time slot that we have.
I'll be there.
I'll be there.
You'll be there? Okay. Maybe.
I got 4 o'clock flight to Charlotte, probably not.
Right.
We're not gonna make the traffic.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing else on this, that's our last item for today's special meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Holmes, seconded by Councilmember Cook. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. We are adjourned.